behaviors that can vary greatly from culture to culture. So it's not just the social interactions, but it's also that culture that they come from. The 6 fundamental skills that I'm going to be looking at and really pulling into my research when it comes to language development is print motivation, vocabulary, print awareness, narrative skills, letter awareness, phonological awareness. So those areas, all of those areas are actually a part of the 2 assessments that I'm going to be gathering data on and tracking that over a program year, a whole school year for this district. The other thing is it's also, research tells us that children from low-income families tend to recognize fewer words upon entering preschool, which also then again trickles down to when they get to kindergarten and so on and so forth throughout their school year. So one of the other conceptual frameworks that I'm looking at to provide basis for this research is what they call the 30 million word gap, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's a great research, but basically back in 1964 we know that that war poverty began, and so they really were looking at families, low-income families, and the impacts that it's having on language development for long term with those children. And so back then, so Hart and Risley in 2003 from the University of Kansas conducted research on the effects of socioeconomic status and the impacts it has on language development. And through this research is what the 30 million word gap comes from. And so just a little bit about this case, Hart and Risley actually recruited 42 families to participate in the study. And it consisted of 13 high-income families, 10 families of middle socioeconomic status, 13 families from low socioeconomic status, and 6 families who only received welfare. So they had no other income but welfare coming in. So over this span, over a year span, they went in and they conducted, each month they did 1 hour long observation with the parent and the child, and all they did was they just observed the interactions that were going on. And so the results of that showed that 86 to 98% of the words used by each child by the age of 3 were derived from their parents' vocabularies. So that's pretty amazing, because they were actually, within this study, the youngest one was 7 months up to the age of 5. And so that's pretty astounding to think about. And then the other thing is the number of words heard varied greatly along the socioeconomic lines. And so we all know, as we're in the education field, we're seeing that. You can tell those children who come from low income backgrounds versus those that come from higher incomes. And the other thing is children from families on welfare heard about 616 words per hour, while those from working class families heard around 1,251 words per hour, and those from professional families heard 2,153 words per hour. So it's a big difference in the amount of language that's happening within the home, and that's not even looking at the school environment. So basically what they found through this research study is they found that higher income families provided their children with more words of praise compared to children from low income families. So that's another thing to really think about, how that's impacting language development as well. The other thing is children from low-income families were found to endure far more instances of negative reinforcement compared to their peers from higher-income families. So that's where that social emotional development curriculum comes in that's so needed within the preschool years, and even farther than the preschool years, really. And then the last thing is the research showed that a child from a high-income family will experience 30 million more words within the first 4 years of their life than a child from a low-income household. So that's it really gets you to think, how can we really impact these children who come from low-income families to really be able to help them to be successful in school as it relates to literacy and language development. So the methodology of my research, again, I'm going to be focused on one of the urban school districts here in the state of Tennessee, and they actually are the holder of the Head Start grant, as well as they have state-funded pre-K. And so within the last 3 years, they have their state-funded pre-K and their Head Start classrooms. All of them have the same curriculum. They have the same assessments. And so right now, but there is a difference between the Head Start classrooms. They receive more family engagement, that family service component, versus the pre-K. And so it's going to be a little interesting to see the difference there and how that impacts the outcome. I'm going to randomly select 25 Head Start classrooms and 25 pre-K classrooms in the district, because they are now serving with Head Start and pre-K. They are serving almost 150 classrooms, so a large amount of classrooms within the district. I'm going to have both a quantitative side to my research and a qualitative side. The quantitative is where I'm going to look at what they call their PPVT 4 scores, and that's the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test scores. They conduct those twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, and so I'll be looking at those for both Head Start and pre-K classrooms. And I'm actually going to be taking the data from the last 3 years. So some of these children have actually started out in Head Start and might have went to Head Start for a year and then went to pre-K for a year, or they might have stayed in Head Start for 2 years. So it'll be interesting to compare that data. And then the other part of the quantitative data that I'm going to be looking at is what they call Teaching Strategies Gold, and it's actually an assessment tool to the curriculum that they use, the creative curriculum, if you're familiar with that. So that's the assessment tool, and with the Teaching Strategies Goals, it is actually aligned to the Head Start Early Learning Framework, and there's 38 objectives. And within those 38 objectives, there's about 9 language and literacy objectives. So I'm going to be looking at those specifically within this research and comparing those. I'm going to conduct a t-test for correlation of the scores to the years of attendance. Is there a direct correlation between how often the children, if they attended strictly Head Start versus Head Start and pre-K versus just pre-K, which one has the better outcome on literacy and language development? Then the qualitative side of the data that I'm looking at is doing teacher and family surveys, and basically this is just going to give me information on the teacher side about their experiences and their education background. And then on the family side is where I'm going to gather their income data, but I'm also wanting to look at the parent's educational status. Does that have an impact? Does a parent with just a GED versus a parent who may have a bachelor's degree or above that's in pre-K, does that have an impact as well on their language outcome on that? So basically that's it in a nutshell, a really small nutshell. So is there do y'all have any questions, or is there anything that maybe what I just didn't present that was real clear? And that you thought, well, what did you think about this, or have you thought about that? That might be helpful.
I thought it was very clear. I would be very interested to see the research when you finish, because as a third grade teacher, usually a lot of times usually we don't even know if the child has been to pre-K or been to Head Start unless they tell us that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we don't have pre-K at our school. We have pre-K, but it's in a different facility,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't see those kids.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time they get to us, we don't know if they've been there.
Right.
But I would like to see, the impact that it has on them and the difference
Okay.
between the Head Start. Because, yeah.
Yeah, because and that's the next thing that after this research that I would love to be able to look at is that long range, because a lot of the research is saying once children hit that third grade mark, there's really no difference in if they attended Head Start, pre-K, or if they didn't. Because after third grade, it's basically they're all back on a level playing field. So there again, what makes that happen? Why is that? What those factors are, and so that's something to really think about as well with this research.
I have heard that, but I don't know if I agree with it, because it's got to have the impact on them.
Yeah.
If they're getting all that extra learning at such an early age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You would think so, for sure. Yeah. Anything else? Is there anything? No. Okay. Well, again, thank you guys so much for just giving me the time to just kind of present this. And again, you know, once I go through it, and I will definitely give you guys feedback from it and let you know how it goes.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.